Hello, everyone. Jill Whalen here to answer some questions from our Peace of Mind group today. I posted, I asked people if they had any questions. We haven't done a Q&A video in a while. I like to do them once a month or so. So this seemed to be a good opportunity because I didn't have anything new to say. So it's always good to get questions from you guys, so know what's on your mind, and we'll see how it goes. So we did get some. I'm gonna dig right in, and hopefully people will join us and be live. If you have questions along the way, feel free to post them here in under the video. I think I should be able to see them, but we'll see. I don't always, but I will do my best to try to see that if you have more questions. You can also post them in the other question thread. I am looking at that on my other computer. So let's see what we got here. We had a couple questions from Thomas. He said, does insight occur on its own and with no input from me? It seems that I have to seek out insights or make them happen. Well, if seeking them out is working for you, then cool. I'm not gonna tell you that that's wrong or bad. Whatever. If you get insights, however you seem to get them, then that's awesome. Um, to me, I think everybody's different with how they get insights, and I think some people also maybe are confused about what an insight is. So let me step back for a minute and talk about that. Somebody said the other day when they watched the Linda Pransky video that I had posted that they liked the way she called an insight a realization. So when you realize something, and I like that too. That's really a good sort of a good definition of an insight. It's realizing something in a different way than you once knew it, or something new that you didn't realize before. Um, so it can be, an aha moment, like, oh, that's what that means. That's kind of how I think of insights. But there's different levels of insights. There's these little ones that, we just get them all the time. We don't even realize that they're insights, and maybe that's the difference is when we do realize that it was an insight. That's when we know it. So that's what an insight is. So yeah, they occur on their own all the time, Thomas. They just, you can be just hearing something and suddenly you hear it in a different way. Um, so that's for sure. If you can seek them out, then good for you. As I said at the beginning, that's cool too. But I don't personally know how to do that, so I can't help on that. Thomas also had another question. I'm starting work at a coffee shop next week. I'm mildly worried that it's going to be stressful, tiring, a lot of pressure, and that I'm going to do not going to do the job well enough. Can you please speak to this, Jill? Thank you. Sure, I could speak to that. First, there's nothing we can do of the fact that we're having those kinds of worried thoughts or anxious thoughts about something new like that. But for me, the more I understand how this stuff works and the more I remember like that all those times in the past when I would be anxious about something coming up in the future, how like my worry was kind of ridiculous. Once I did the thing that I was worried about, it like totally, most of my worries were unfounded and just we can never, I guess I've learned just through experience that we can never really predict the future and stuff. So for me, lately, I've noticed that as soon as I notice myself doing that, like worrying about the future, oh no, what's going to happen? There was as an example, a thing was supposed to happen with my daughter yesterday, my daughter who lives with us. And it was something a little concerning to me. I'm not going to give details, but um, so off and on for the past few weeks, I found my thoughts going there, wondering, thinking about all the what ifs and stuff like that. But as soon as I noticed them, and this is where awareness is so key. As soon as I noticed I was doing that, I remembered, oh, well, this is silly. I don't know what's going to happen that day. And instead, I just kind of got curious about, like, I wonder what's going to happen on Tuesday, because it was very much unknown to me what would happen. And I just got curious about it. And I knew that I would know what to do at the time. And there was no way for me to predict how I might handle whatever would come up, because it was, it was a lot of unknowns. And just like a new job, it's the same thing. Like, you don't know who's going to be there, what kinds of things they're going to ask you to do, what kind of training you're going to get. You may know some of it, but you just don't know. And so for me, like, just being curious, kind of like, I mean, even if it could be bad or stressful or whatever, we still don't know. Like, so there's kind of that, you can, in a way, like, I was excited in one way, just sort of to get it over with what would happen on this day, um, but and yeah, so for me it was a question of noticing when worried thoughts would come up, remembering nothing I can do now. I'll just take it as it comes, and that'll, and I'll know what to do at the time, because that's all I can do anyway. And it didn't make sense to me anymore to waste energy on those kinds of thoughts. And so they didn't really pop up much, or as I said, if they did, I noticed them, and then that made them go away. As it turned out, things didn't work out. Things worked out fine. I knew what to do during the at the time, and I did it. And worrying about it, I could see, would not, anything I thought about it really wasn't helpful. Wouldn't have been helpful. It would just have been a waste of my energy. It made me feel bad, which I didn't need to do. Next question, Lisa. Hi, Jill. How do I deal with guilt when I can't do something because of my anxiety? I've just been asked by my niece to see if I can look after her little girl for an hour while she goes to the dentist on Tuesday. I went into that mode and my habitual thinking came to play, so I said, sorry, I didn't feel comfortable looking after a 2-year-old on my own. I'm way out of practice, and I do have a lady coming to my house, blah, blah. So she, goes on to, she basically made up some excuses, and I'm guessing because she said, why do I always feel bad saying no and guilty too? And this plays into the next question that Ruth has about conditional habitual thinking. So guilt, the feelings of guilt, first of all, we can't help them. We can't help any thoughts that we get. But the reason why we get them is our conditioned thinking. And it's really societal in a way, especially guilt. We have this, I would say, this is just me. This is what I believe, that all of us have this innate need to have people like us, and to feel, to be loved, so to be liked and to be loved. We have this innate need for that, and so that colors like everything we do and think and stuff. And so there's this like horrible feeling when we think someone might not like us. It's crazy in a way. It's ridiculous. We don't need to have this, but it's just an innate thing. I think, it's probably a survival mechanism. We need to be in communities and groups, and you need people to like you and love you. And that need for love is, it goes a lot deeper. It's the whole feeling of separation and wanting to be part of a whole. I was working on a blog post earlier that talks about this, but that to me is the core of these guilty feelings, for stuff like that. Like when we say no, it's not that the fact that we said no, or don't want to do it, or anything like that. It's the fact that, oh my God, this person's not going to like me anymore. Or they're going to think poorly of me. And we hate that. We just hate that, because it's just that innate desire to be loved. But like, so what? The thing is, this is where my so what's come in. And I know I say this a lot, but the other people, we can't help what someone else is going to feel about us, right? We don't know that this niece of yours is going to think anything more other than, oh, well, I'll find somebody else to babysit, you know? Like, other people aren't thinking about us as much as we think. They're too busy thinking about themselves. So other people aren't like, I mean, and even if they are, so what? That's where the so what comes in. People people will judge us no matter what we do, right? Even if you said yes and you did it, there could be some judgment. You know, she didn't like the way you did it, or you know, who knows? We can't help what other people are gonna think about us, say about us, judge us, and so the feeling of guilt again is it's just a use. It's not useful to you. You can't stop you can't stop it, but it noticing it is good. Like the fact that you notice that you have that feelings, that's what I was talking about before, about awareness. Like for me, being aware of my future thinking, anxious thinking, and that itself, you know, makes it disappear, poof. So recognizing the guilt, maybe understanding that that's why you're having it, because you just don't like the thought of not being liked. I mean, and really, when you think about it, who cares if you're not liked? It doesn't really matter. Um, that's where the guilt comes from. So I think just understanding that a little bit more, and it's all innate. It's all conditioning, and you can't help what thoughts you get. But when you understand them, that's what's helpful. Hopefully that somebody said you're right. Thank you. So Ruth was about conditioning too. Let me just see if there's more that I haven't said. This understanding has helped a lot, but I still feel stuck here. Certain places I thought made me feel anxious to the point of panic attacks. Now I understand it was my thoughts, not the places, and my anxious thoughts created the horrible physical symptoms. Always thought it was the other way around. Thank you. Oh, that's not... That was about conditioning, yeah, not guilt. Somebody else did ask about guilt. I think it down below, and hopefully that covered that. The conditioning, always thought it was the other way around. Yeah, I don't know. There's not really a question there. So Ruth, if you're listening and have other questions about it, I'm not sure what else to say, since I did talk about that conditioning. I do have another video about conditioning as well, or plenty of them. What else? Helen, still struggling with people / situations can't affect me. And I asked her for specific examples maybe that confuse her. She said she's not confused, but reacting badly to past events, but also someone who is intent on harassment relating to those events, despite police warnings, who thinks they can intrude on my life with no consequences. I have ignored the provocation for nearly 3 years, but they just keep coming back. I struggle to believe there are no bad people sometimes. The police won't do anything as there is no threat to life. Okay. So, I'm not sure where you got the idea that I'm saying there are no bad people. I think people do lots of bad stuff. You know, I mean, bad is subjective, so there's that. What one person thinks is bad, another person may not. But people do bad stuff, and they do it to us, and we don't have to like that. I mean, I'm not saying you have to like somebody who's bothering you where you need the police involved. You don't have to like that or think differently about it. All I would say to that is you can understand maybe why that person acts that way. That's where I would go, because that would help me. If this was me, right, and I was in a situation like that, I wouldn't necessarily want to go have lunch with that person. There's a quote from Marianne Williamson where she says, "You can forgive someone, but you don't have to have lunch with them," and that's the thing. Like, you could forgive this person, still keep a restraining order or whatever else you might need to keep them away from you, but you can understand where it's coming from. Their bad behavior, everybody's bad behavior, comes because of their thought in the moment. So they're having some kind of horrible thoughts if they're doing bad stuff in the moment. And, who knows what was done to them when they were little. I mean, it's a horrible, vicious cycle when people act in horrible ways. So just knowing that it is helpful to understand the situation. You can have compassion for that person and be like, Jesus Christ, I wouldn't want to live in their mind. But again, you don't have to have lunch with them. But that understanding of it and even forgiving them can just make your life easier. You still protect yourself, but you can kind of be like, it's got nothing to do with me. They're doing what they're doing, and that sucks. And do whatever you can do to protect yourself, obviously. I hope that helps answer what I'm saying. But there certainly are, I guess I wouldn't say there are bad people, but there are people who do lots of bad things. Let's put it that way. Guilt for doing wrong in the past, that's from Jolene. I think that's the same as whether it's guilt of something you just did 2 seconds ago or did in the past. To me, holding on to guilt would just be kind of ridiculous, like, because it, you're doing it to yourself. There's not even any way you can imagine that it's somebody else doing it to you. It's like, why would we torture ourselves? So we can have those thoughts. I would go back to the video I did a couple days ago on, now I forget. On about our thoughts, not about disidentifying with our thoughts. Because if you're having guilt thoughts, it's your own self beating yourself up. And so disidentifying with that voice that's trying to make you feel guilty. I would go back to that video rather than me repeating all that in this one. Okay, we have another one from Thomas. Thank you, Thomas, for all these questions, or we wouldn't have had many. Why is trying to figure this stuff out unhelpful, and why do we do it? And I wasn't sure what he was talking about, so I said figuring out what stuff. And he said, trying to figure out what needs to be in order for me to be okay. Trying to figure out how our feelings are created by thought, etc. So why is that stuff unhelpful? Well, generally trying to figure stuff out, if you want to use that phrase, is using our our personal thought. And it usually can get all jumbled up. Our personal thought, it's just like we're struggling with that personal thought, trying to think of all the pros and cons and answers. And I'm going to point you guys to, I just listened to a podcast, Brooke Wielden Reese from what used to be called the Cypress Initiative and is now called the Spark Initiative, just has a new podcast. And I just listened to one about them. And they went through this whole process coming up with the name for their podcast. This was the second one. I just listened to it, and I'll put a link to it. But basically, they did this very thing. They used their personal thought, and they went crazy for a whole day. The whole 2 of them, and then the rest of the company, struggling to come up with names, even though they tell everybody that's not when we're going to come up with our best ideas. We're going to come up with our best ideas when our mind is settled and suddenly, something just comes to you. And that's basically what happened to them. Like the next day, they kind of popped out of what they were doing, and boom, the right name came right to them. And so that was a cool example, because even knowing this stuff, like, we still do it. They didn't realize they were doing the very thing that they teach others not to do. And that's true of all of us all the time. We don't see it. We don't see it as thought and in the moment, when we're caught in it, and it's when we wake up from it, then poof, it all disappears, and then those new wise thoughts pop in. So I hope that answers that one. So yeah, those aren't helpful. So I see some question here, I think, on this thread. Jolene, can you talk about what recovery can be like? I'm sure it's different for different people. I'm still struggling, but have had milder times/days. Recovery, I don't know what recovery from what. If you're still here, Jolene, and can answer that, I'm not sure what you mean, recovery. So I can't really answer that. People saying hi. Thomas asked, what do you mean by disidentifying with the mind? There's a video that I did a couple of days ago. I'll post a link to it, and you can listen to that one where I explain what I mean by that. Stacy, Winnie, a lot of people watching. That's cool. Lisa came on late, and was the one who asked about guilty and said, now I feel guilty I was late. See, now, so what you worried that I'm going to think something bad of you now? You know, you can see if my answer, you'll go back and watch the answer. I won't spoil it for you if you missed me answering that one. Teresa, I have now started people to stop putting on me. I have now started people to stop putting on me. Not sure what that is. Todd, we appreciate you, Jill. Thank you. Jolene, recovery from high anxiety, panic. Okay, let me go back to what she originally said. Can you talk about what recovery can be like? So from anxiety. I guess I didn't understand the question because anxiety is not something in my mind, at least the way I understand it. It's not something you recover from. Like, anxiety is part of life, and so there's no recovery from it. It's just like happiness, anger, sadness, it's just like any emotion. Anxiety is just an emotion we feel. So it's not something we can recover from because it's always going to be part of our lives. And so, like, not having anxiety as part of our lives just isn't realistic. It's not realistic at all. So there's nothing to recover from. It's life, unless you want to recover from life and not have any emotions. That would be not a great way to live. To not have emotions, to not so there's nothing to recover from. So there's no like before and after anxiety. It's just life. Life continues. When you see anxiety the way you used to see it, and when you see anxiety maybe the way you see it now, maybe that's what you mean. The difference is simply that with all of the stuff, the inside out understanding, when you know that the world works one way, inside out, not outside in, you're just able to go through. It's sort of like the post I wrote yesterday. You're able to go through the highs and the lows with just a little bit more grace. You're a little bit more. You can be really, really uncomfortable, feeling anxious as all hell, but yet a piece of you is okay with that because there's nothing you can do about it. It's life and it's happening. So for me, that's the difference. Is that little bit more of comfortableness with the uncomfortableness. It's a strange way to phrase it because you're still uncomfortable, but it's just that it's okay because you have no choice. We don't get to choose when we're anxious and when we're not. And so when we know that and we let life just live us as it's going to do no matter what, things just feel a little bit better, I guess. but it's different for everyone. But again, there's really no recovery. So I don't want you to, if you're believing that like there's going to be no anxiety in your life because you understand this stuff, then you're on the wrong you're on the wrong track. And I've posted about that many times. I would read my post, The Misunderstanding of Understanding, because that's probably one of the most important things everyone in this forum can learn. What else? Liz, does thought involve intelligence? For example, I have to write a report for work and clearly need to think and use my intelligence to write it. Does thought play a role in this? Okay, this is a good question. Generally, once we've learned a skill, like in your work, presumably, you're good at your work. You know what you're doing. You've practiced your work. Once you've been in the position for a bit of time, and so you understand the ins and outs. And so when it comes down to writing a report or giving a talk or doing whatever you might need to do at your work, you have all the skills at your disposal. You have all the knowledge, or you obviously, when you're writing a report, you may need to look up stats. You may need to, go back into things that have been said before. You may, there's things you have to do. But if you've been in this job for a while and you do feel somewhat of a, maybe not an expert, but somewhere in that vicinity where you know your job, you probably have noticed that when you're doing these reports and things, it's just coming out of you. Like, it just happens. You just know what to do. You know where to get your facts, you know where to do it, and you just write it. Like, at least that's how it's always worked for me for work stuff. Like, when I write blog posts, or when I used to, in my old work, have to write reports for the companies I did. I used to have to evaluate their websites and then write these long reports to give it to them, even though they never would read it or do anything in it. I still had to make it the best it could be. But it didn't take like personal thought. The intelligence part is that the prior learning that I did, everything I do, every website that I reviewed and worked on gave me insights into how things worked for the next one. I was always constantly learning and reading in my profession and learning and understanding stuff. So when it came time to doing these things, I looked at it, did it, and just did it. And to me, it doesn't take like personal thought. It just comes out of me. And then it would be kind of cool too when the report is done to be like, wow, I did all that. And without effort. I mean, it would feel like without effort. It would take hours upon hours. My reports used to take me probably 20 hours of time to do altogether. And that's why it was cool when it was all done, because if I had to like personally think about the whole thing and like, ugh, I can't imagine trying to work that way. That's just, to me, not how stuff gets done. Stuff gets done through our innate intelligence about what we've already learned. The learning part of it is where sort of thought comes in when we're first in a new job and we have to figure things out. Sometimes personal thought comes in, but even that, it's still coming from a deeper place, I think. Thomas again, trying to figure it all out is so exhausting. Yeah, so stop it. Don't try to figure it out. There's nothing to figure out. Thomas, are we ever really stuck? I don't know. Not physically, unless you're in quicksand. Angie, do you think she might mean recovery, stop overthinking? Maybe. But even then, I don't have an answer. Jolene has more here. But before I started with panic attacks, I didn't have them, so they weren't part of life. So then you know what it's like when you don't have panic attacks. Because think about when before you had them, that's what life was like. And then now you have them, that's what life was like. So maybe that's your answer? Not sure. Okay. Oh, Jolene posted more. Okay, so that makes sense. More grace and flow rather than jumping on the panic and making a meal out of it. Yeah, pretty much. Because then it has not, there's no fuel to the fire. You're not adding those second thoughts, third thoughts, fourth thoughts, or you're not adding fuel to the fire. If you just are, having that more grace, it, it, yeah, it can subside. Lisa, I'm late because I have been in bed sick for 2 days, and I guess I care too much about what other people think. I look forward to watching the full video later to see your answer to my question. Which was basically, my answer was basically, yeah, caring about what people think. Liz, thank you, Jill. Makes perfect sense. Been wanting to know the answer to this question for a long time. Cool. Somebody else said thank you. Great. Then I don't see, let me refresh the other thread in case there's more there. Shirley will be watching the video later too. Great. Let's see. Nope, it looks like I don't see any additional ones there. So I've probably been doing this long enough, and I have to eat some lunch. So I will catch you guys later. Feel free to post more questions. I'll type them answers to you. This is always fun for me, and hopefully helpful to some people. That's the idea. I will catch you guys maybe tomorrow. Bye.